And if you just Good Morning Nigeria on the NTA network service, it's now time for business. But Nigeria's foreign reserves fall below $47 billion, the lowest since April 2018. Details of this and more on Business News with Joy Uzo.
Welcome to Business News. The nation's external reserves have dropped below $47 billion, losing $251 million in the first 6 days of the month, according to data from the Central Bank of Nigeria. The reserves, which stood at $47.119 billion as of July 31, fell to $46.868 billion on August 6, the lowest level in nearly 4 months. The CBN data showed that the external reserves rose from $46.845 billion in April to $46.881 billion on April 12. The decline is attributed to the increased demand at the foreign exchange market. The reserves had hit a high of $47.798 billion on July 5 and had been declining since then. Meanwhile, the nation's manufacturing sector is reputed to be a huge potential that has contributed immensely to the development of the private sector, employing over 60% of the nation's workforce through direct and indirect jobs. Concrete manufacturers in Abuja alone generate about 1.1 million tons of quarry products monthly, which translates to about 1.8 billion naira. The sector is a key revenue earner for the government, says Uzo George Tiga, the chairman of Abuja Concrete Manufacturers Association, who noted, however, that one of their challenges is incursion of foreigners into the Nigerian local markets.
There were deliberately orchestrated plans to astronomically increase the prices of quarry products in Abuja. We condemn this act and we frown at the non-engagement methods of unilaterally deciding without due consultations with stakeholders. Certain steps must be taken by government to protect local investors against harsh and hostile foreign investors.
Finally, the equities market for 3 consecutive days closed on a negative note, with the NSE All-Share Index depreciating by 0.09% to close at 36,299.82 basis points. We now bring you a graphic representation of the closing figures. And on that note, we'll wrap up Business News. Thanks for staying tuned. I am Joy Uzo.
Thank you very much, Joy, for the Business News on Good Morning Nigeria. Next now is a review of the stories on the front pages of some of today's newspapers.
Well, it's now time for us to take a look at the front pages of national dailies for today. And of course, Kinsley, we have mainly political matters on the front of
absolutely. Politics is still reigning as lead story, and of course, as second lead and third lead, and minor copies on the front pages of the papers. Let's begin from the top, right, without necessarily taking a look at the lead stories. From the Guardian newspaper, it's our first this morning. Above the nameplate of the Guardian, governors condemn freezing of Benue and Akwa Ibom accounts by EFCC, with Reuters, state alleges political witch hunt and denies diverting 250 million naira road fund. And then just the photograph you have there, which is below the nameplate, is the scene from Ikorek yesterday when Senator Godswill Akpabio, the former Senate Minority Leader, decamped from the PDP to the APC. And beside that is a headline says, APC justifies DSS action And Saraki, others urge probe. That action relates, of course, to the siege to the National Assembly that occurred on Tuesday. Daura, that's the immediate past DG of DSS, remains under house arrest amidst investigation. And then the lead story is also straight out from the National Assembly. It wasn't about me, but Nigeria, says female representative who dared DSS. With a rider for Boma Goodhead, it runs in the blood. And there are other headlines, of course, that I'll take at the foot of the Guardian newspaper. Here.
All right, now let's go to the Nigerian pilot. The Nigerian pilot. National Assembly, let's below the nameplates. National Assembly reconvenes next week over 242 billion naira INEC budget. And now the main headline: I will only resign if, with 4 riders, Saraki dares APC senators over impeachment. Says he is not desperate to remain Senate president. You must resign now, APC tells him. Insists on it's immoral for Saraki to cling onto power. It's on page 4. And of course, below the photograph there, you could see the lady that Kingsley just mentioned a short while ago, the rep with the Senate president in that photograph. But below that, we have EFCC freezes Akwa Ibom government account as Ababio joins APC. It is unconstitutional, says Governors Forum, and of course PDP. Now, below that, the foot of the Nigerian pilot, will court orders Inspector General of Police to produce INEC chairman. It's on page 5. And over 5,000 Zamfara IDPs return home. And then I'm still in Imo Guba race. Madumere, of course, Madumere is the just impeached deputy governor of Imo State. He says it's still running. The story is on page 6. Now, why Bayelsa children shun scholarship exams is on page 4. Now, Saraki includes door meeting with IBB. It's on page 10 of the Nigerian pilot.
All right, let's take a look at the Punch newspaper. The Punch newspaper, some of the stories that we read, they're also there on the front page of the Punch, but above the nameplate of the Punch says federal government to buy 17 billion naira equipment to track fuel distribution. That's on page 23. That's one of the decisions arrived at the Federal Executive Council meeting yesterday. Again, Governors Forum tackles EFCC over frozen Benue accounts. That's on page 7. INEC budget, that's the kicker. Senate may meet next week, says Yakubu, who is INEC chairman, with 2 riders. Vote buying, INEC may implement secret voting and produce Yakubu on August the 14th. Court tells Inspector General of Police. And the lead story for the Punch newspaper says National Assembly invasion. Saraki APC reps demand probe. With 3 riders, Buhari Oshibajo agreed on the arrest removal. That's according to an aide. APC makes a U-turn, defends DSS action. And Daura to remain under house arrest, that's according to a security source. And the photograph you see there, these are the photographs of Indian hemp and tramadol seized by operatives of the Customs Department, and that was at Zone A in Ikeja. Customs seized 2 billion naira contraband in 2 weeks.
All right, now let's turn to the Authority newspaper. Authority newspaper, above the nameplates here, we have some headlines there. Defection, I will take Akwa Ibom to the center, says Ababio. It's on page 4. And then 250,000 jobs for Nigerians in Centenary City, says management, is on page 5. Then Buhari endorsed Daura's sack, says the presidency, on page 4. Now the lead story here is impeachment. Saraki dares APC with 2 riders. Ohaneze, Saraki demand full investigation over NAS invasion. Senate President holds secret talks with IBP, which also appeared on other national dailies. And now, below the photograph there, we have a freezing Benue Akwa Ibom accounts unconstitutional. Governors Forum is on page 3. And then contempt. Court orders IGP to produce INEC balls on Monday. It's on page 29 of the Authority newspaper. And then federal government secures $150 million World Bank loan to fight poliomyelitis. Page 9 has details of that story on the Authority newspaper.
And then, Kira, let's return to the Guardian newspaper. Right at the foot of the front page of the Guardian, you have a window of 4 headlines there. 3 of them are actually news headlines, and then the other one is promoting a column. Now, there's the headline that says, "World at risk of irreversible hot temperature, report reveals." That's on page 4. Kira, let's begin our conversation this morning there. That's the soaring temperatures that Europe has witnessed in recent weeks. It's something that is giving cause for concern.
Yes, you remember the 2015 resolution in France with
Paris,
respect
yes,
to adoption of some policies towards mitigating climate change. But perhaps a country like America, which is being governed by the Republicans now under Trump's watch, actually did not buy into that. And that is actually hitting that aspect of world's decision to tackle climate change. Because climate change doesn't have any limitations. It's an environmental thing. Therefore, no nation could be safe from that. And happening in Europe, it means that it will still come down to this continent. And I don't know what African leaders are doing about it and what is even possible to do, because it's more or less a natural phenomenon.
Yeah, if you recall, one of the decisions at the COP summit in Paris in 2015 was the target to reduce carbon emissions by at least 2 degrees. That's the total effect by 2 degrees. But experts are now saying that on account of the activities, global activities that have been recorded lately, plus the consequence of the hot weather, that even if we were to reduce economic activities and total activities and then reduce carbon emission by 2 degrees centigrade, that we are unlikely to achieve the ultimate goal of having a cooler world. You can see where the hot temperatures are and where the fires have also broken out. Fires in Greece, fires in Portugal, and then you go to the Far East. Yeah, in the US, California, the fires have been raging. It's the largest fire outbreak in the history of California. And that's some indications are that those fires could actually rage up until September. That's in California. So you have a number of hectares of land that have been burnt out together with properties. Yes. And then the Far East, you have seen the devastating consequences of flooding. Over 200 persons were killed by flooding in Japan alone this year.
And it's also affecting Africa. Of course, Nigeria has had its own fair share of flooding this year. It's not yet over because the rains are still coming. And what really baffles many is the fact that the developed nations who contribute almost 80 or more % of the emission, should take the first step, because of course many nations rely on coal, and then manufacturing industries that actually, bring out all these emissions that we're talking about. A country like India relies so much on coal for power generation, and many other countries as well. And America is out to try to revive their coal activities, which was moribund for some time now. So these are things that are contributing to these emissions. That is actually...
We're in the month of August. If you recall, on Good Morning Nigeria, I'm not sure if you and I were on set on that occasion, when we were discussing the flooding, potential flooding and weather patterns for this year. And we had guests who said that, listen, the August break that we used to know is unlikely to occur this year. And from what we have seen, I mean, it's rained virtually every day now. It's here in the Federal Capital Territory. Exactly. And there have been consequences as a result of flooding in some parts of the country.
All right, now to politics now. Since Tuesday, the polity, got heated up one way or another because of the invasion or barricading of the National Assembly. And of course, the fallouts are just coming up. And we will live to see how the National Assembly will handle the situation, because there are probes being called for, and the National Assembly should also reconvene, as they have promised yesterday, to tackle some of the national issues with respect to the INEC submission of its proposal for the 2015 elections, with respect to 2019 election, with respect to 242 billion naira that are put across. So I wonder how this will affect the deliberation of the National Assembly, whether the invasion will somehow affect the deliberation beginning from tomorrow.
Well, I mean, again, Kieran, you very well know that's the second topic we're having for discussion this morning. We have two topics: operational limits of security agencies and then developments at the National Assembly. What is significant straight away is that the principal officers of the National Assembly were scheduled to meet on Tuesday, when, of course, that blockade occurred at the National Assembly. And then that meeting was called off. But they met yesterday, which was Wednesday, and at that meeting, they invited the INEC chairman, who was originally supposed to meet with them on Tuesday. So it's a heavy development to indicate that, all right, now the principal officers are proceeding with steps that may eventually lead to the reconvening of the plenary of the National Assembly so that they could consider those matters that are pretty urgent on their plate. There are a number of other issues, but of course, how they would interact, how they would carry on the business of their respective chambers, it's left to the members themselves, to consider. But there's another developing story. That's to say, we first read it yesterday. I think it was from the Nigerian Pilot. It was a front page story from the Nigerian Pilot, but today the papers have it on the front page. The Guardian, it's above the nameplate. That's the governors condemning the freezing of the accounts of Benue and Akwa Ibom states by the EFCC. The EFCC has not given its own side of the story as to why those state government accounts were frozen.
And I think it's happening for the first time, in the history of politics in Nigeria, when the account of a state government is frozen. And because it's going to also affect activities of those states with respect to both salary, paying of salaries, and carrying out other developmental functions. But in any case, I think until EFCC comes up with the reasons for that, Nigerians will be able to now understand why that action was taken.
Whatever the rationale is, there are some points to note. We saw what happened in the first 8 years of the current republic between 1999 and 2007, when President Olusegun Obasanjo was head of state and commander-in-chief. Now, the Lagos state government proceeded to create local governments. And the argument was that, listen, this was not in line with the constitutional provision, and that only the local governments that are listed in the schedule to the constitution will be recognized. Now, Lagos state government eventually reverted those local councils to become local council development areas. But that until the reversal, the Obasanjo administration withheld the allocations that were due to Lagos state government and saying that those allocations would go to only the 20 recognized, constitutionally recognized local governments in Lagos. Now, that was the federal government versus the state government. Now, but here is an agency of the federal government that is freezing the account of a state government. I think it's important for the EFCC to step forward and explain why the accounts of Benue and Akwa Ibom have been frozen. And then for the state governments, if they feel that it is unjustified and it cannot be defended, they go to court. We have seen state governments in the past take the federal government to court. It happened during the Second Republic when the Attorney General of Bender State sued the Attorney General of the Federation. So that's the matter.
And going back to the Obasanjo era with respect to the Lagos State saga at the time, we also recall that many opinions came on board, and they were of the view that everything concerning local government rests on the state, that the state determines how to run local government, and that's also constitutional. But people were like, how could the federal government now stop releasing funds meant for local government? Because
how to run, but not how to create.
Well, if it creates for convenience, because perhaps Tinubu then, as the governor of Lagos State, did that for convenience, for developmental convenience, of the state to be able to reach out all nooks and the nook and cranny of Lagos State.
Yeah. All right, Kieran, I'm sure that these are matters that will come forward. Want to just take a look at it, unless you have some other headlines.
Let's have the Daily Sun. We didn't take anything on Daily Sun this morning. Now, why I dumped PDP? That's beside the nameplate, PDP for APC at Babio. Then two riders, Shomole Tinubu senators, received ex-Akwa Ibom governor into ruling party. Governor Emmanuel sacked two commissioners. That's of Akwa Ibom State. Now, Saraki Dogara speak on National Assembly siege. That's the lead story on the Daily Sun. And of course, we have Daura sacked DSS DG under house arrest. We read that in other dailies. There's 6 Kano lawmakers defect to PDP. Then EFCC freezes a Akwa account. We have told you about that. Now to the
That's right. In Kano, what's happening, of course, you know, the deputy governor resigned following threats of impeachment, and we have had a number of resignations from various officers in Kano, from the APC to the PDP. Let's take a look at our editorial this morning, which is coming from the New Telegraph, and it's at page 15 of the New Telegraph. New capital base for insurers. Now, the editorial, in part, says that in a manner not economically viable, recent statistics indicated that the insurance industry had been carrying risks of over 1 trillion naira with just a gross premium income of less than 400 billion naira. And that in the latest dispensation with regard to a new capital base for insurers, it is said that beginning from January 1st, 2019, the industry will operate under a new tier-based minimum solvency capital consisting of Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. According to the New Telegraph, we believe that, according to them, underwriters will naturally fall into their capital classification and cover risks therein widely and effectively.
Kingsley, there's no doubt that the nation's insurance sector needs to be recapitalized, because Nigerians over the years have lost confidence in the insurance companies. You know, most people don't even insure anything anymore because they are not sure of receiving anything in case of accident. So it has been there for over the years. But if they recapitalize at this point, I think it will be a good omen for the development of the country.
All right, Kirian, that's much we can take. Let's it for the newspaper review session. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll get into the discussion of our 2 topics.
Hate speech is not a joke. It incites genocide and crimes against humanity. Most of Africa's civil wars are caused by hate speech from one tribe against another. We don't want it here. The Nigerian government stands firm against hate speech.
Under no conditions whatsoever should we tolerate or excuse or justify hate speech or hateful conduct of any kind, especially where such is illegal.
There is no doubt that the resurgent push for separatism, as well as the rising cases of ethnic and religious disharmony, are all traceable to the growing phenomenon of hate speech.
One nation bound in freedom, peace and unity.
Nigeria, one nation, one people.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
Psst, you in the air-conditioned office with the itchy throat. Strepsils. Girl in the spotlight with the raspy throat. Strepsils. You in the pollution. Yes, you. Dry throat. Strepsils. Hello in the downpour with the scratchy throat. Take Strepsils. Strepsils, with its soothing medicinal ingredients, will heal the harm done to your throat from external factors. Strepsils. 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 For a dry, itchy, raspy, scratchy throat.
What makes a Nigerian one powerful?
I trust the power of Dettol's 1 capful for bathing. The power of Dettol's 1 capful protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs.
Be 100% sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the daring and invincible Louis the Mosquito. Responsible for 200 malaria cases all on its own. Is there anything that can kill Louis? Presenting Mortine Power Guard. Its powerful formula kills malaria mosquitoes fast. So, get Mortine Power Guard.
These days, people get their news and information from more media sources than ever before. Some of the news and information given are fake, unverified, doctored, and manufactured to create confusion, stir disaffection, and cause disunity. Before you believe or share any news, ask yourself, is this real? Is it from a credible source? Is it verified or verifiable? Fake news is dangerous. Whether you do it for fun or for political gains, real people can get hurt. Fake news, don't create it, don't spread it.
This is a public service announcement from NTA.
Madam. Brought us as usual.
As usual. You have no problem.
For the three
you are welcome, sir.
As usual, yeah?
Welcome.
You take that one.
Yeah, take that one.
You don't understand? We want Nigerian homegrown rice. Finish. You don't have? You don't have?
Join the rice revolution today.
No other rice that tastes like Nigerian rice. Are you sorry? That's the Nigerian rice we are talking about. Chocolate made in Nigerian rice. Healthy food. I'm going to bring Mrs. Mobo to come to chocolate rice made in Nigeria here. And see how it are made.
Correct.
Now they are cooking.
Correct.
Homegrown rice are good for your health. It boosts our economy and give employment to our people.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
For years, the NTA has been promoting science, technology, arts and crafts under the tagged name National Children's Expo. We are set with another edition as we gather children around Nigeria. Junior category ages 6 to 12 and senior category ages 13 to 18. The theme for Expo 2018, achieving self-sufficiency in agriculture, meeting the challenges of security and exposition of alternative energy as pathways to national development. Date, October 21st to 25th, 2018. Venue, NTA Headquarters Arena, Area 11, Garki, Abuja. We are set to celebrate the best of innovation across the country. For more information, please call the following numbers. NTA ETV, promoting learning.
You're welcome back, but if you just joined us, it's Good Morning Nigeria, and we're reaching you live on the network service of Africa's largest television network, the Nigerian Television Authority. On Tuesday this week, operatives of the Department of State Services threw a security cordon around the National Assembly here in the Federal Capital Territory. On that day, senior officers of the National Assembly were scheduled for a hold a meeting at 12 noon. But unfortunately, neither the officers nor the staff were allowed in for several hours. That incident has continued to generate reactions across the country and indeed elsewhere in the world, especially on the heels of the termination of the appointment of the Director General of the Department of State Services. We are taking on this issue again today, and we have three guests with us here in the studios looking at the perspective of the operational limits of security agencies in a democracy. First, we'd like to welcome, at this time, of course, a familiar face on Good Morning Nigeria. Indeed, all three of them are familiar faces on Good Morning Nigeria whenever we are discussing security issues. Mike Ejiofor is a former director of DSS as the Department of State Services. He's also a lawyer. Mike Ejiofor, pleasure to have you with us on the program this morning.
Very much.
And we also have the pleasure to introduce to you Felix Obald, retired Assistant Inspector General of Police. It's good to have you, sir. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigeria.
Also with us in the studio is Kabir Adamu, Security Risk Management Expert. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning.
All right, gentlemen, once again, pleasure to have you. The retired AIG Felix Ogbuado is also a lawyer, by the way. Gentlemen, let's begin by having your thoughts on what happened at the National Assembly on Tuesday. Mike?
Yeah. Actually, what happened on Tuesday was a total embarrassment, not only to Nigeria, but the international community. It's unacceptable and must be condemned by all well-meaning Nigerians. I was personally embarrassed about that situation that was created. Bearing in mind that, first of all, the government has been appealing to the Senate that adjourned till September 25th. And you know how critical that election, 2019 election, is to Nigeria. And they were asked to come for this vehement debate, only to be prevented from going into into the national, even the workers were prevented. I was watching it live and I didn't believe. I thought I was in a dream. It should be condemned and it's unacceptable in a democracy.
Well, first of all, what's your take on that? Because I'm also sure that you watched it on live on TV.
Yes, I did. And I'm in total agreement with what my colleague has said, Mr. Michael Joffer. It was a huge embarrassment. It was anti-democratic. We've never witnessed that kind of thing before. I mean, to have seen DSS operatives masked, wielding rifles, and denying staff of the National Assembly access to the offices, and even the National Assembly leaders of the two chambers, the two houses, whom the federal government have been pleading with to go to sit and address some of the urgent matters that have been just kept them like that. So it was so bad. It was a huge embarrassment. But the good thing about it is that the way the acting president reacted promptly, I commend him for that. How I wish we've been addressing all other issues in the past the way he did yesterday. Because one of our biggest problems in this country is the absence of deterrence, which keeps on fueling impunity in this country. We can do anything and get away with it. That's one of our biggest problems in this country. I would not like to continue. I just hope with what the acting president has done, this is going to be the end to this kind of conduct. It's not acceptable at all. It's highly condemnable. A huge embarrassment to all of us. Kabir?
Yeah, I agree with my two co-panelists. It is an embarrassment. However, I would like to remind us that this is not the first time. In 2014, we witnessed a similar incident, and I thought the parliament then would have constituted an investigative committee to look into the reasons why the incident in 2014 happened, and why the police at that time and then the other security agencies in the National Assembly allowed such an incident to happen. The word mentioned by my co-panelist includes, deterrence. Now, how do you ensure deterrence? If you do an investigation and you find out who is guilty of perhaps abusing a certain section of the law, you take punitive measures against that individual or that organization, as the case may be. So it happened in 2014. Nobody was punished. And then, of course, unfortunately, we're seeing a repetition in 2018. So going forward, I'm hoping that perhaps an investigation will be conducted, and then the individuals as well as the organizations that are responsible would be punished for whatever abuse of the Constitution or the laws setting up that particular agency of government was conducted.
Well, I was wondering, well, just one point that I would like us to take on earlier in this conversation, and it is as follows. Yes, gentlemen, you have said it's an embarrassment, but the officers, that's to say the men who were wielding the assault rifles, and some of them, hooded, indicated that they were acting on orders from above. This is a phrase that we hear repeatedly during operations, that they say they are acting on orders from above. Exactly how should orders from above be couched, and exactly should when such orders be carried out? What do we mean when you say orders from above? Is this to exonerate yourself and say, look, it doesn't concern me? Mike?
Yeah, you see, these orders from above, I mean, there must be an authority that gives the order. So when you say orders from above, it sounds ambiguous, and people tend to use it to hide under this kind of a situation and cause mischief. Like I said, I was totally embarrassed, and like Mr. Obaudi said, the action taken by Mr. President saved us a lot of problems. If you recall that day, Senator Ben Bruce was on air calling on international communities to come to the rescue of Nigeria. What would they, I mean, how would they have explained it? And again, I don't have blames for the operatives who went there, because they were acting on instruction of a high authority, which is the DGSSS, who gave the DGSSS order to go and carry out that kind of action is another issue to be investigated, because a lot of issues have come up, a lot of theories have come up that this person gave the order. I don't want to mention names because I'm not sure where the order authority emanated from. But like the Senate, the National Assembly has said that they have instituted investigation. At the end of the investigation, should be able to know who gave the order. But for you to come and say order from above to me is meaningless.
So you were the director of DSS, you know, so you have experience of what it means to say order from above. In this respect, if you were to be the current DG of DSS, where do you receive your orders from? Where should the order come from before you can now ask your operatives to take action?
Well, you see, he can initiate an order.
By himself?
By himself, he can initiate an action and give orders. You know, when we have what we call intelligence circle, we have 4 stages, direction, and so the direction comes from the DG. Again, it will depend on his discussion with his authority, the president. Such an action that warrant this type of embarrassment couldn't have been an action initiated by the DG alone. It should have discussed, I mean, the authority should have come from the president, who he reports to directly, or a joint meeting of the Security Council met and a decision to that effect. But I believe that if such a meeting had been held, there's no way approval would have been given. And if the acting president was not aware of such an operation, didn't give approval, so where is the order coming from? So he should be in a position to accept responsibility for whatever has happened as the DGSSS, because that's his office.
All right, thanks. Retired AIG Obuadu, let's see, it's order from above.
Well, like you said, that is an ambiguous expression. But thank God an investigation is going on now, and we do hope that it's going to be an in-depth investigation. We need to put an end to this expression of orders from above. The DGSSS, former DGSSS, who's in custody right now being investigated, will tell us where he got his orders from. Because the way the acting president reacted clearly shows that he was not aware of this directive and was not happy with it. I was listening to a newspaper review yesterday morning, and one of the headlines I saw was that the acting president actually conferred with the president, who is in the UK, and he gave his nod to what he did. So maybe it's possible, even the president of the UK did not know. So let this ex-DG tell us where he got that order from. That should be part of the investigation. We must get to know so that we stop this expression of orders from above. What's the meaning of orders from above? You are the boss of the SSS. Are you the one that gave the order directly to the operatives who went to the National Assembly to seal up the place? If you are not the one, where did the order come from, the one you passed on to your operatives? Nigerians need to be told that. And I do hope that this will be the very last we hear of that expression, orders from above.
Yeah, this is particularly pertinent, Obuadu.
Yes.
Now, we have seen, not just in the Instant Republic, that's to say the Fourth Republic since 1999, we witnessed it during the Second Republic, but particularly now in the Fourth Republic, we have seen occasions where police officers, go to the State House of Assembly, for instance, and deny right of entry or exit to members, or otherwise provide the safe passage for a certain class of the lawmakers to do whatever they want to do, usually when they want to remove their principal officers. And then when they are asked, look, why is there a garrison atmosphere around here, it's the same response, orders from above.
Yes.
Yeah, so how do we explain that?
That's why I'm saying now that I'm insisting now that this current ongoing investigation must put an end to this expression. Whatever any agency goes to do, let members of the public get to know where the directive came from. Don't shield anybody. The DGSS, like Mr. Mike said, answers directly to Mr. President. So what's wrong with him saying that, look, it's Mr. President that ordered me to go, to do what I did? If the police did what you're saying now, maybe in Benue State, for instance, I saw that from above, is it the Commissioner of Police that gave you the directive? Or is it the IG who gave the directive from Abuja? We need to know. But like I've said, the basic thing is that this expression of orders from above must stop, must be terminated.
You know, the question Kingsley posed is very apt here, because this is not the first time or the second time. I remember during the first 8 years of the Fourth Republic in Enugu, where I come from, such incidents took place, blocking lawmakers from gaining access to the chambers, and of course allowing some selected members to have access. So it's been there. And at this point, I'd like to ask our friend Kaibu Adamu, I mean, what kind of risk are we talking about here? Because it's all about security. It's all about security operatives overstepping their bounds. So what is your thoughts on this?
Okay, you've asked me a very wide question. I'll try to encapsulate it. Let's go back to the act setting up the security agencies. What kind of powers does it give them? Now, in that regard, I would quote subsection 3 of each of the sections that give the 3 agencies under the National Security Agencies Act, which says that any other responsibility given to them by the presidency, and in one instance by the National Assembly. So that's a bit vague. And then, of course, over time, we've seen court rulings that actually allows them to carry out responsibilities over and above laws that are existing in the country. Perhaps the only caveat is the constitution of the country. So in essence, these agencies have powers that unfortunately, I would say, are not in congruence with our democracy. And if I would go further, I would put the blame on the National Assembly. Let's remember that those laws were introduced in 1986 under a military government. And then in 2018, those laws are still existing with sections that speaks clearly of powers that unfortunately are not in line with our democracy. So the question I will ask is how come over these years the National Assembly has not deemed it fit to look closely at those laws and make them more amenable to our democracy? I agree with the points that have been posited here, that the use of that word orders from above should not be, in existence in today's world. However, and I'm sure especially Mike will agree with me, for an operative who is in the field and is approached by anyone who approaches him, the likelihood is that that's the kind of response you will get. But imagine a situation where a congressional committee, in this case a parliamentary committee, is set up, and then the DGSSS is invited and he's asked questions regarding the actions. So here I'm quoting the oversight responsibilities of the National Assembly. He is obliged to explain to them in clear terms the reasons why he carried out certain actions. The question I would put further, especially to the National Assembly, is how come we've not been seeing this type of committees, hearings, especially for the security agencies. In essence, I am saying, and with due respect to the National Assembly, they are victims of their own, unfortunately, inaction.
Well, Kabir, thanks. Our principal focus actually has to do with the operational limits of the security agencies. And this is why I would like, again, to put this question, rephrase part of what my colleague Kirian asked earlier. In the course of the operations, and there are many security outfits in the country, as we know, and if you're looking at the country's security architecture, do operatives have a sense of locations that are off limits, even if you are acting on orders from above? I give an example, and this is hypothetical. Assuming the masked DSS operatives who laid a siege to the National Assembly on Tuesday were given the instruction to say, look, go to the presidential villa, allow no one in, allow no one out, what would have happened? Because the villa, of course, represents the executive branch, and the National Assembly represents the legislative branch. Is there a sense of ordering, of saying, listen, even if it's an order from above, there should be some off-limits locations?
You see, I think we should guide ourselves, just like you said. on the focus of our discussion. This is not issue of functions now of the various agencies. I still maintain and insist that when our security agencies want to carry out illegal acts, they go under that phrase of order from the above. If you are carrying out a legitimate and legal action, the first thing to do is to report to the National Assembly. We have information on so there's going to be threat to law and order, breakdown of law and order. So we are deployed to come and you work in liaison. You don't work in isolation, for God's sake. So yeah, when you begin, how on earth, for God's sake, must somebody go to the National Assembly? Why I'm very, very provoked is that the difference between the military government and our democracy is the National Assembly, the legislature. So if you overthrow the legislature, you have overthrown the structure of a particular structure of government. And if you have genuine intention, you liaise with the management of wherever you are going to. These are our plans, this is what we intend to do. But you don't have a list to say you are going to exclude some people from coming in. That's pure impunity. And if our security agencies begin to constitute threat to our democracy, we must have cause to worry. We must have cause to worry because this is not the only one. This happened because the acting president took action. We have had worse situations. A situation where an inspector general of police will be invited by the National Assembly and he will not honor it, and nothing is happening. It's annoying. So,
all right, retired AIG. Yes. But yes, I mean the same question.
Let me just add to what he just said. One of the areas the investigating team must address is why was the National Assembly sealed? Up to now, nobody knows why they did what they did. Members of staff who work in the National Assembly were denied access to the National Assembly. The members of the Senate and the House of Reps in committees who had functions to be doing there were also denied access. The leadership of the two chambers that was supposed to have met to discuss the issues that are still pending at the instance of the presidency were also denied access. So why was that action taken? This ongoing investigation must tell us why the DSS did what they did. Up to now, nobody has told us why they did what they did. And that is very key. So that we'll stop all this guesswork here and there. Let us know why you did what you did and see the rationale behind it, if any.
Well, still, Kieran, you know, Mike raised the point about functional cooperation and functional collaboration. I mean, the National Assembly isn't just an open place. You have a security management. So what other should have happened? I believe there are police officers who are also posted there, and perhaps, you know, even the DSS officials themselves. So what could have happened? What should have happened in terms of, I'm asking the question about off limits. If you are just parachuting, you know, to the National Assembly and say, look, throw a security cordon around it, that would seem unusual.
Now, back to that same issue again. You're absolutely right. The police are there. There's even a divisional police officer in charge of the station in the National Assembly before the SS operatives came. All the video clips I watched throughout the period this lasted, it was just one policeman I saw standing at the gate, looking very passive, unconcerned. But most of the operatives there were these SS operatives. And that question which comes to mind is, why were the police blocked out of this thing? Or why were they not involved? Why did they deliberately stay away? All these are issues that come up. Was it a kind of tacit approval for them to do what they did? Were they aware? Were they told why they did what they did? And if they were told, did they raise any objection? Did they complain to the IG, for instance? Did the IG take it up with the acting president? And somebody was even telling me, although it's not confirmed, it was just yes, it wasn't confirmed. So just permit me to say it. I was made to understand the acting president had a meeting with the DGSSS and Inspector General of Police on that same Tuesday. And DSS never disclosed to the acting president that this was what was going on. It was after the meeting, the acting president got to know that, oh, the police has been sealed. Say, why did you do that? Eventually, he probably reached out to the president in the UK, sought his views and all of that. The president said, go ahead and do the needful.
All right.
So
going back to
people
what...
must synergize. There must be synergy. There must be synergy. But when you deliberately block out some people, you know something sinister is in the pipeline.
I think Mike did tell us here a short while ago that DSS can also initiate an order when the head deems it necessary to do that. Now, considering the events in the National Assembly lately, we've just heard about the forcible removal of the mace at the National Assembly. We also know that many people defected from one party to another shortly before the National Assembly went on recess. That being the case, could it be that there is some kind of uncertainty envisaged by the director of the DSS to have acted the way he did? Maybe he didn't disclose that as a security officer. He could say, look, let us try and stop or nip in the bud anything that could happen, that these people are returning after the mass defections and all that. Kaibiru, could that be a reason?
The reasons could be varied, frankly. Like I indicated earlier on, the powers that the mandate that these organizations have are not very clear. They've been given responsibility to, in certain instances, like the scenario you painted, prevent the breakdown of law and order. In this case of the DSS, if it's an internal security matter. So if in his own thinking, like Mike mentioned, that constitutes internal security, in certain instances, he would require to clear from someone above him. So it could be the National Security Advisor or it could be the presidency. But in any case, it has to be someone under the executive arm of government. I don't mean to add to the complexity of this situation, but like Mike mentioned, there is an internal security mechanism within the National Assembly as against the external security mechanism which we are talking about now. Now, the DSS is part of that internal security mechanism. In other words, there are DSS operatives deployed inside the National Assembly. There are police operatives, there are civil corps operatives, there are road safety operatives, and I think there are the NIA operatives inside the National Assembly. Then there is also a retired general who is heading that entire team. So there's that internal security mechanism. Now, the question that came to my mind when I saw the video clips, how come that internal security team allowed an external team to take over the complex itself? If I'm heading such a unit, my primary responsibility is to protect the integrity of the asset, in which case the national complex. So how come an external body, and in this case we are told they were about 20 in number, or they are about, in someone said 10, so I'm not too sure in their number. But if you put all these agencies that I mentioned together, I'm almost certain their number is probably more than 100. So how come just 10 persons came to violate the integrity of the national complex? So questions need to be asked, and the investigations that are being conducted will probably bring out that. In simple terms, what happened regarding the barricade of the National Assembly, unfortunately, exposes the National Assembly complex in itself, that there are lots of vulnerabilities. Let's remember, not too long ago, someone walked into the complex and stole a mace. We are told that an investigation was carried out, and then certain actions were taken. Clearly, those actions have not corrected whatever vulnerabilities exist. So, from a risk management perspective, there are high risk regarding the security operations of the National Assembly complex.
So let me just add something. Okay. You said the point Mike raised, the issue of initiating some kind of orders and all of that. If the DSS is operating all alone, it can initiate an order for them to operate, okay? But when you have a synergy of other security agencies, they must all come together. If the DSS originated that order, you bring it to the table, and all the agencies will look at it, examine it. You will have to make your presentation. Gentlemen, this is what we tend to do, and this is why we think we should do it, because this is the information we have. Then you'll come together. But a situation whereby all the other security agencies were nowhere to be found, and only the operatives of the DSS took over the gates of the National Assembly is highly questionable. Highly questionable.
Yeah, Mike, you want to add something?
Yeah,
yes.
You see, I want to use this forum to appeal to the heads of our security agencies. There's need for coordination. There's need for synergy.
Precisely.
I was watching the television on that day. The IG was interviewed. Said, my people are not involved. We are not involved.
Yes.
He exonerated himself immediately. But has he not done worse things before? So there's need for synergy. What is happening now, the issue of interagency rivalry is rearing its head again. The NSA is not working with the DG, SSS. The police is on its own. I mean, we cannot deliver under this environment. It's quite unfortunate. And the earlier the president takes decisive action to re-engineer the security architecture, the better for us. Because we are going into election. If we go into election as we are now, we are going to have a lot of problems.
Well, in terms of cooperation, by the way, Mike, we have no proof to show that these agencies is just itemized, are not talking to one another or cooperating with one another. But let's just put it hypothetically that, look, there's a challenge of interagency cooperation. We're looking at what occurred at the National Assembly only on Tuesday. Yeah. But there have been instances in the past where operatives from Abuja parachute into a state and they are carrying out an operation. They, again, they garrison the entire environment. They operate without recourse to the municipal security operatives, and then they get away. How should that be handled? Because we had seen it. I'll give you an example. I think it was in 2004, 2005, late 2004, late 2005, when PDP was having its own internal squabbles. Yeah. And one of the factions in Edo State wanted to open a new secretariat on Urubi Street. So what they did was to get military personnel, to block off, and that's a major, it's an arterial road. In fact, it's actually Nigeria's highway A121. It takes you right to Lagos. Yeah. They garrison it off, and then they open their secretariat, the usual show of force, and so on and so forth. And those who were in the state said, look, we didn't know of this, they came from Abuja. How do you deal with such situations?
Yeah, let me throw light on that. When I say that the SSS can initiate operation on its own, those are covert operations. They are covert operations, not overt operations with the National Assembly. That's the point I'm making. If I have an information now that somebody has arms in his house or is planning to overthrow government, I don't need, the SSL does not need to begin to say, let us go and see what we do. You can initiate the operation, execute such a warrant, and recover whatever you want to. But when it comes to issue of national security, like you're talking of Boko Haram, they should come together, work out strategies, modalities on how to tackle these issues. That's the point I'm making. So when you initiate, you cannot on your own initiate action to go and seal the National Assembly. It's very unprofessional.
I was talking about, Makabir will come to you. This one of Abuja operatives, getting into a state and carrying out whatever instructions they want to carry out, and they return to base without recourse to the local...
That is an abuse of the process. If security agencies are supposed to leave Abuja for a state, for instance, the security agencies on ground must know where they're coming, and they must work together. But people cannot just come from Abuja and you just ignore the local security agencies there and do operatives there and do what you want to do. We know things like this happen in this country because of the kind of situations we find. Factionalization of political parties and all of that. So at the state level, say, the Commissioner of Police, I'll show you something. The man comes to Abuja. I'll praise from Abuja. And of course, when the local operatives get to know that operatives that come from Abuja, those are our bosses. So they withdraw, they fold their arms, and they look helpless. That is the scenario that plays out. But ideally, that is not right. It is not right.
Kabiru, I would like you also to, have a take on this, but to add to that, Kingsley just painted a scenario of that took place in Edo in 2005, where a faction of the State Assembly had to bring in...
No, it wasn't. It was a faction of the PDP.
Well, PDP
yes, of the party.
Yes, that were brought in security operatives from Abuja and functioned effectively at the street he mentioned and got away with it. Now, are we not also considering the fact that politicians also play roles in connection with the invitation of police or other security agencies to achieve their personal interest or collective interest?
Yeah, you're right. In intelligence, we use the term paymaster. Of course, and he who pays the piper dictates the tune. So in certain instances, we see the kind of scenario you painted. Very recently, in Ekiti State, during the campaign of now the elected governor, we saw when a police officer was brought in from Lagos, and then there was a negligent or accidental discharge of his weapon. So clearly, there are issues within the deployment mechanism of all the security agencies that allows that kind of abuse. I mentioned earlier on in my discussion that for us to critically analyze this issue in terms of the operational limits of this organization, we need to look at the laws that set them up. I personally believe that the issue or the challenge is in those laws. The laws are quite vague. They were set up during a military era. And unfortunately, and I would want to emphasize this point, I hope we'll discuss it, regime protection has crept up several times in terms of the operations of this organization. The leadership of the three organizations under the National Security Agencies Act realize quite quickly, once they are appointed, that the major way for them to remain in office is to express their loyalty, sometimes beyond the limit of what the laws or the mandate they have, to the president, quote and unquote, or the presidency as the case may be. And that is why we see instances where they carry out certain actions that unfortunately is against the mandate that they have. So to answer your question, politicians definitely are aware of these loopholes within the laws, and then they use money and other influences, including appointments, to get what they want from these agencies.
That's right. The point you just made, Kabir, with regard to regime protection, of course, that was usually uppermost during the military regime. Regime protection and then regime projection. But in a democracy, what should be the proper relationship between the security agencies and political authority, considering the likelihood of abuse of powers and misuse of the security agencies? A.I. Jobuade will come to you on the mic.
I think if you will permit me, let me give a personal experience I had when I was in service. An advice to people who find narrated experiences is that every security operative should know what the law says in every situation, in any given situation. Let me go back to my personal experience. I was Commissioner of Police, one of the states. And the Inspector General of Police at the time called me to say that I should go to execute a search warrant. I should go and raid the government house. That they had information that the incumbent governor, sitting governor, had stockpiled firearms in the government house. And I told my boss at the time, "Sister, would you respect? This man is a sitting governor. He enjoys immunity. We cannot go and raid that place." And he told me to shut up. That my boss is a lawyer too. He said, are you senior to me at the bar? And I told him, "Sir, what I'm saying has nothing to do with one's age at the bar. I'm only telling you what the law says." He says, "You have told me I must go and do it." I didn't go. I sent for all my sectional heads. They came and I told them. They were all shouting, screaming. "What kind of trouble is this?" I told them not to bother. I'm the one wearing the shoe. I already commissioner at the time. I said, if I had to retire, let me go at this point. He called later and asked me how far I had gone. I said I was still mobilizing men. But I had not stepped out of my office because I knew what he was telling me to do was illegal. And I said I had made a mind that I will never do something that is illegal. Because at the end of the day, they will say, you are supposed to be a lawyer. They won't tell you you're a lawyer. They are supposed to be a lawyer. That means you are supposed to have known. You ought to know. So I didn't do anything. I think I was mobilized. Say, yes, Anna, you're not talking. You're not mobilized. Say, yes, I was mobilized. They're good. What are you doing that time? I kept quiet. After about 45 minutes, I know what he told me at the time. He said it was the president who called him from the UK to say that we should do what he was telling me to do. But the third time he called me, he said, Felix, where are you? I said, I mobilized the men and personally did the operation. I was in my office, so I never slept out anywhere. I was sitting in my office, and I was surrounded the government house. We're about entering. I'm leading up. He said, no. Mr. President just called out to say we should take action on that. On that. And I told my officers, hey, the Muslims were praying, the Christians were praying, and they were looking at me. Sir, what kind of man, what kind of person are you? I was just smiling. So you can imagine, if I had done that thing, you would have been telling the whole world that Felix Ogbaru is a lawyer. You ought to have known that this is a sitting governor. Yes, he's supposed to know. He's supposed to be a lawyer. He's supposed to know the law. And look at what he did. And in that same state where I was served, the person I took over from got a similar instruction. And he had the guts to tell the big boss, sir, can you put down in writing? He threw him out because he foresaw what could happen if he was just acting on verbal instructions. So my advice to operatives, make sure you do what the law says. Exactly. Forget about compromise, money and all of that. If you do what the law says, you'll be at peace with your conscience and with your God. Honestly, all of these things will stop. We should have the courage to take the gospel truth, the truth. Sir, what I tell him to do is wrong. I cannot do it. The worst that will happen is retire him and he goes. But don't be scared of that kind of situation, because at the end of the day, God will make a way for you. But don't be scared. We must do the right thing. We cannot continue the way we're going on now. But like we've said it before here and in other places, politicians are part of this problem. We're in a nation where if people contest elections, both parties expect to win. If one loses, all manner of allegations will come up. This, that, and all of that. Security agencies compromise, vote buying, rigging, all manner of things. Even when the process is clearly very, very transparent, the serious issues. Security agencies must stand for the truth. Do what is right in line with the provisions of the laws that regulate the activities and all of that. Once we're able to do that, most of this problem will...
To have a law and order society is the basis of democracy.
I entirely agree with him, not because I'm a lawyer. He's only a professional that can do the right thing. If you are not trained professionally to do your job, you always do the wrong thing. And you forget that posterity will always judge your action. Like he said, most of our security challenges are politically generated. And if you come into this situation, a situation where you appoint a DGSSS as a member of a political party, it kills professionalism. So I think government should look into that. It kills career progression. Professionalism will die. Because as a politician, you must satisfy your political masters, just like Kabir said. He who pays the piper dictates his tune. So our security agencies, not only the SSS, must be professional. Do the right thing. And there's no way you can do the right thing without being professional. If you don't have the training, the capacity and the capabilities to do the right thing, you must also be courageous, because that's a point of leadership, to say no to what is wrong. But if you don't do that, we will have problems.
Well, I think it's not just for you to have the will to do it, but to be strong enough to defend your decision, as Felix has said, that if he had carried out that action on that day, perhaps he would have, lost his job. But he took the risk of saying, no, I am not going to do it, because of, his exposure and knowledge and understanding of what that action would have meant. And
well, all of this is tied up. We're pressed for time now. We're going to sign off our guests. All the points just been articulated. They're all tied up with the order from above.
Yes.
What retired AIG was talking about, order from above. You can actually liken that to what is now the war crimes jurisprudence. In the past, field operatives could claim that, look, they received instructions from their commanders. That's why they went, on genocide, on a genocide mission. But the War Crimes Tribunal, we have seen that since the collapse of Yugoslavia. I said, look, how reasonable was that instruction given to you? All right, so well, that's the most that we can take. Kabir, you raised the point about regime protection and therefore the proper relationship between security operatives and the political authority. Well, that's the most that we can take. We'd like to thank all three guests for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria. They're all our regular guests. First, Kabir, Adamo, security risk management expert. Thanks a lot for being around today.
Thank you for having me.
And also, Mike Ejiofor, former director of DSS. We'd like to thank you for your insights. And last but not the least, retired AIG Felix Obuadu, also a lawyer. Thanks a lot for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much.
All right, so it's still Good Morning Nigeria. We're taking a short break now. When we return, we'll take the supplementary discussion, which is on development still at the National Assembly.
In hot and dry conditions is hard. Causes the body to sweat, which attracts germs that are easily passed from one person to another.
What keeps you so cool, man?
Dettol Cool combines Dettol's protection and an invincible icy feel. For super cool confidence, use Dettol Cool.
Dettol soap is now also available for 100 Naira only.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Oh boy, climb this thing now. No be only to connect lights.
Come do it yourself now.
Now wow. Oh boy, calm down now. Oga Kasali electrician, who would they look for with this?
Oh.
Oga Kasali, come help us fix this wire now.
Sorry, I no longer carry out illegal connection. It puts the lives of people at risk and can cause fire outbreak and disrupt power supply. I will never be part of anything that has to do with this any longer because change begins with me.
Oh boy, letting him talk makes sense. Oh boy, no could carry this ladder from off.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
We thank you for staying with us. Now to the second leg of our discussion this morning, a revisit of developments in the National Assembly. And joining us to do this is Honorable Chidi Duru, former member of House of Representatives. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
And also we have Abdul Rahman Abu Hamisu, who is a public affairs analyst. Hamisu, you're welcome to this.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigerians.
All right. I'm sure, gentlemen, while you were at our reception, you were monitoring the conversations in our first segment, which had to do with security issues. We've dealt with that extensively. Now we're getting, as it were, into the chambers of the National Assembly, the House, as well as the Senate. Honorable Chidi Duru, let's begin with you. The National Assembly is on recess from plenary, as it were. There's been, a lot of pressure on the members to reconvene in order to address some urgent matters. From your perspective, how urgently should they respond to this and then return to their leave?
Well, I would want to say, first and foremost, this will not be the first time that members of the National Assembly are called back to duty, particularly if there are matters of exigency that requires their attention, and they've had to call back their members from vacation to come back and then deliberate on the matters that are very important. The matters of INEC, which is the burning issue, in my view, and I think is also in the considered view of the leadership of the National Assembly, is a matter that they had wanted to talk about, to discuss. And that led to the President of the Senate issuing a communique and inviting the leadership of the National Assembly. By that, it means the Deputy Speaker, the Majority Leader, the Speaker of the House, and of course the Deputy Speaker of the House, asking them to come back for a meeting 12 noon. So in my considered opinion, I think that he would have weighed the matter and considered it serious enough and urgent enough that will warrant the leadership of the National Assembly to come together to have a meeting on 12 noon of Tuesday to deliberate on, one, whether it's important for the National Assembly to come back to deliberate on the matter, and or should they extend it again to the comeback in September. So that should be something that the leadership will take a decision. And it's only when the leadership of the National Assembly take that decision that they can now convoke the National Assembly and then call back the members to come back from recess to deliberate on the matter. But until that decision is taken, I wouldn't say whether it is that urgent or not. But matters of national election, INEC, I would think that is a matter that would require the leadership to reconvene the House for the purpose of deliberating on that matter.
Now, Abdurrahman, what's your take on the fact that the members having recalled from recess to address the burning national issue, which has to do with the INEC budget for the 2015 election?
Well, as my colleague rightly pointed out, the essence of the National Assembly is to assist government in terms of appropriation, in terms of asking the right questions at the right times, in terms of how money is budgeted, are spent, and additionally making laws. This places the National Assembly at the heart of governance anywhere in the world. And if the people that are representing Nigerians that are supposed to act in line with the wishes and the interests of the people, we are aware that Nigerians wanted a very free, fair, and credible election in 2019, and that all preparations leading to that election must be preparations that speaks to the challenges that INEC is supposed to surmount before the elections. And if that is the case, and considering the nature of our elections, how volatile it is all the time, and the successes that has been recorded in 2015, we are hoping that the current chairman of INEC would build on the successes that were recorded, and that whatever may lead to failure should be mitigated. And National Assembly is supposed to be part and parcel of this process, considering their roles as a watchdog of the executive and all agencies of government. So calling back members to consider the environment is in line with issues of national security. For if there is anything that could lead to killings instantly in Nigeria, is not getting our elections right. And we have litanies of examples that we can really bring to fore to support this assertion. So getting election right in Nigeria, especially in 2019, is key to stabilizing our democracy and peace across the country.
All right, thank you very much. Let's return to Honorable Duru. Honorable Duru, considering what has played out in recent times, if the National Assembly were to reconvene for plenary, would they have the presence of mind to focus on those key issues? Or alternatively, how can they focus on those key issues against the background of recent unsavory occurrences?
Unfortunately, we are at a time where there are a lot of politics going on as against the substance of governance that we would like to see. But before I go into that, I would like to draw ourselves back to the question, and that relates to what the Speaker of the House said yesterday, that matters of election, and in fact, nation building should not be seen as a matter of emergency. Elections, we know, will always happen every 4 years, except in constituencies that have gone into by-elections and states that have elections that have been staggered as a result of the governors being thrown out by the law courts and all of that. So we have always known that every 4 years that the country will go from one election season to another election season. And therefore it does mean that the government, working in concert with the executive, with the National Assembly, should have prepared before now the budget and bring it before the National Assembly for their consideration, and not these usual quick ways of fixing things that will emerge, that as has emerged in this case, that the members of the National Assembly had to now be called back from their recess to consider that. And having said that too, you now look at the background of the policies going on, and with the usual suspicion that have crept in, and then there's this ongoing thinking by the practitioners in the National Assembly that is it not a decoy to call back the National Assembly to resume so that an act could be taken to oust the leadership of the National Assembly, whether it's in the Senate or in the House. But that's a matter for debate, whether that could happen or whether that was the intention that behind it. But essentially, my viewpoint still remains that the National Assembly as constituted have the powers and the privileges to convene and to do what is right for Nigeria and then for the governance of this country. And at any point in time, from 1999 to date, whenever they are called to rise up to the occasion, I will always believe that the National Assembly members will always rise up to the occasion. So this will not be an exception. Once the leadership of the National Assembly, under the chairman or ship of the Senate President, do consider that there's a need for members to come back to deliberate on any given act or policy of government, I would believe that the members of the National Assembly will have the frame of mind to sit, to consider, and to reach the right decision for the benefit of Nigeria and the government of Nigeria.
Well, recent occurrences can be sublimated.
Regardless of the occurrences, at the end of the day, whatever takes place in the National Assembly will only be by members of the National Assembly. It cannot be induced from the outside. Even if it's induced from the outside, it will take a collaboration of members of the National Assembly to bring it to bear within the floors of the House. I think the mistake that has been made over the period is for people to think that you could force the National Assembly members to take a given decision without themselves buying into that agenda. And until the members of the National Assembly buy into a given agenda and in a given script, it is impossible to effect any change in the National Assembly without the members of the National Assembly, first and foremost, buy into that script.
Now, having the right frame of mind is actually key to what you've just submitted, because as Kingsley raised a short while ago, the events in the National Assembly could affect their frame of mind to take a decisive decision based on the 2019 budget for the elections. I'd like to ask Abdulrahman, did that budget come late in the day? Because, as he also said, there would have been reasons for recall from recess if that budget was presented in good time. What's your thought?
Well, in nation building, especially when you are dealing with situations that are not planned, for instance, you have elections that, for instance, if INEC should equal a budget for, say, this year we're going to do A, B, C, D, INEC is not even in control of the litigations that usually follow elections, as well as sacking of some people that are occupying a given position. That is one. Secondly, INEC is not in control of how many members will die after elections are conducted. So that sometimes again, even if INEC make provisions, those provisions are tampered with by the vagaries of some of the occurrences that they are not in control of. I don't want to believe that it is coming late because there is nothing like late coming in terms of taking decisions to do some certain things. Though planning is very important, because failure to plan is a plan to fail. So coming from that angle, it is always good that we are proactive in whatever we are doing. But when issues come, we wouldn't say because it is coming late, we will not address to them. I think what we should be looking at is the clash between the interests of those that are occupying public offices and the actual deliverables of the offices they are occupying. Some other times again in Nigeria, the personal interests of those that are occupying roles take precedent over and above the collective interests of the people, so that a given situation is always manipulated for a given interest. For instance, as Honorable rightly pointed out, reconvening the National Assembly is meant to come and look at the budget. But again, there are persons that are apprehensive that the leadership of the Senate may be changed. So in trying to protect the leadership of the Senate, it means that the Senate may not convene, so that it keeps on becoming it keep on retaining the seat. But again, is the Senate president that's supposed to preside over matured people that in the first place elected him because it's just first among equal. So as he said yesterday in his World Press Conference, if he still enjoys the support of his members, his colleagues, nothing will happen to him. We've seen a situation whereby in prior to 2015 election, the Speaker of the House defected and he retained his seat until the election. So it has to do with the confidence of those that really supported you to become their leader in the first place. So if you still enjoy such confidence, nothing will happen. But then in this country, people act, and that is the issues that you people were addressing the last time, where a commissioner of police is being mandated to go and do something that was illegal, that was unconstitutional, because that is the interest of his boss. And he said he was able to do that because he has this firm conviction that it was illegal, and at the end of it all, he will be responsible. So if he failed to do what, to allow himself to be manipulated and at the same time fired or ridiculed. So if we start facing issues the way they come, and we are bold in our action, and we take public interest into consideration, I think we'll be better for it. So that even if you lose anything in the long run, you know that you did it for the nation. So these are the things that our public office holders supposed to start thinking about, rather than holding the nation ransom. And that is what is happening across the board, not limited to the National Assembly.
All right, Hamish, thanks a lot. But by the way, let me just inform our viewers that unfortunately we haven't been able to take your tweets this morning, even though you have the Twitter handle on our screen as always. That's the bottom left-hand corner at NTA GMN. We understand there are some network challenges, and therefore we are unable to access those tweets. But of course, keep your attention on our conversation, as well as your reactions. Perhaps before the program ends, we might be able to read some of those tweets if they do come across. I still want to stay with you by drawing from what Chidi said earlier. Chidi says, listen, if the National Assembly, if and when the National Assembly reconvenes, yes, the members themselves will have to confront whatever issues they need to confront, and that unless they have a buy-in into an agenda, then that agenda is unlikely to succeed. But here we are. Look, there are matters on the table for the that will warrant the National Assembly to reconvene. In your opinion, what should be the corresponding responsibility of external persons, external agents, or external forces in providing a conducive atmosphere for the lawmakers to consider these issues, rather than fueling whatever conflict or whatever unsavory occurrences there have been in the weeks preceding this moment?
You see, anywhere in the world, why democracy is preferred is because it is a method of negotiation between two matured persons, so that nobody will come to blowing each other or exchanging blows or injuring one another. So it's all about horse trading. It's about talking to people's conscience. It's about even buying consciences, if you like. That is why sometimes you hear of Ghana must go, you hear of inducement.
But that's illegal.
Yeah, it's illegal. It's illegal, but it is done. It is done in political cycles.
It's illegal.
So, and that is why I said it's about negotiation between two matured persons. It's about appealing to people's conscience. It's equally about buying consciences. Some other times it is done. It's illegal. You may define it illegal, but in politics, the end justifies the means, and that is the kind of politics we are still playing in this country. And that is why I added that dimension to it, so that we get it in all its ramifications.
About influencing.
So whether we call it influencing consciences, but we are aware. I know of Father Ojekamino Ifeture. his book, Ghana Must Go Republic, and he documented how Ghana Must Go was used between a certain period in Nigeria to get leadership of the National Assembly to change leadership of the National Assembly. So it's documented. It's not as if somebody is inventing anything new. Now, coming to what he has said, what we would love to see is the neutrality of security agencies, so that nobody is given undue advantage over the other group. Now, if the issue is to discuss budget, and there is a fear that, okay, the leadership of the National Assembly may be changed. The leadership of the National Assembly has its own support base, and those that are canvassing for the change equally have their own numbers. So it's a question of who has the highest number. But what we would want to see is a situation whereby the security agencies are used to disadvantage a group and then empower another group to do something that is illegal or to achieve a sinister motive. So whether we like it or not, in the long run, the House must convene, that is, the National Assembly must convene, and whether we like it or not, these problems will still subsist. In the long run, again, they have to convene and face these challenges, whether that of preserving the leadership of National Assembly or passing the budget as requested by Nigerian leadership.
All right, thank you indeed, Abdulrahman Hamisu. I'm already coming to you, Honorable. You were a member of the House of Representatives, so you have experience of what we are talking about this morning. Now, how would you advise your colleagues who are presently at the National Assembly, who now have the onerous task of deliberating on a very important national issue like the budget for 2019 election? What will you be telling them if you're in the position to advise?
Before I go into that, I think it's important that we elevate the discourse and x-ray what is at the back of what is currently going on in the National Assembly and in the country today. I think it's the general lack of fidelity in the political process and the impunity that we've allowed to take place currently in the management of our public affairs. If you look at the Legislative Powers and Privileges Act, it is quite clear that the National Assembly is a sovereign, different and distinct from the other two arms of government. Not the judiciary can even interfere in the way and manner the National Assembly conduct its affairs within the principles of the National Assembly. And on the same hand, even the executive can also not interfere in the way and manner the National Assembly also conduct its affairs. And if you go into the National Assembly, it is very clear that they are a lord unto themselves. So having that at the back of our mind, then what is very clear is that the other two arms of government cannot interfere in the way the National Assembly conducts its affairs. And then two, the fears that we express is again on the background of the impunity also, even by the petitioners themselves. And I want to give an example that we have continued to celebrate over the years, which is the defections of members of the National Assembly from one political party to another political party, and then the public will hail it and then consider that to be a norm. The Constitution is very clear on that. And until we begin to respect the laws of the country as we have it, we'll continue to have this kind of fears and the concerns that people will express that, oh, is it about reconvening the National Assembly to remove a particular person from office? And if we subscribe to the Constitution, if we subscribe to the laws of there would be no reason for this kind of fears. The Constitution, Section 681G, is very clear. If you are elected on the platform of a political party, you would serve your term in the National Assembly on that political party. You cannot jump from one political party to another political party. And we'll still retain your seat. And we'll continue to witness this infraction, not just now. We started from 2002 to date. And the public had not had any public problem.
Just briefly, your advice to the members now who are currently going to be sitting, to conclude on the budget.
I will just say simply that they are elected by the Nigerian public to do their work, and one of the work they have to do is the budget process. Look at the budgeting, and if they consider that is in the interest of Nigeria and the Nigerian public is in the interest of foreign government and all of that, it is in their own interest to pass.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, gentlemen. We are rounding off this segment of our conversation, of course, the second leg of our conversation this morning. And Honorable Chidi Duru, former member of House of Representatives, it's been nice having you on our show this morning.
Thank you, ma'am.
And Abdulrahman Abu Hamisu, a public affairs analyst, is also a teacher and a researcher. It's been great talking to you this morning.
Thank you very much.
All right, now, Coach Emmanuel Amuneke appoints new goalkeepers trainer, and in tennis, Jelena Ostapenko, I know Kisly will call that name better because if he follows lawn tennis, he exits at the Rogers Cup. Our sports desk will actually bring more on that.